Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker shields, death slayers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome, and let's go global. And another video that will remain unpopular, but nonetheless, I'm going to do a good job on it. That's talking about this war on cash, and this is an interesting development to watch because we see this acceleration of people all over the globe now calling for a cashless society. So once you get all these cheerleaders line up, you see this push going for something that's been discussed before and will be discussed again. But interesting timing to see it in tandem with this central bank mania that's going on all over the world in zero to negative interest rates. Because when you put those together with this call for a cashless society, the implications become clear. But first of all, let's look at all the people that are out there now calling for a cashless society or the elimination of high-end high numerated bills. So we have Standard Chartered CEO Peter Sands banning the U.S. $100 bill would, quote, deter tax evasion, financial crime, terrorism, and corruption, unquote. That's a good example to start with because right off the bat, we see him talking about eliminating a $100 bill with this idea that somehow it would they're interested in going after tax evasion, financial crime, terrorism, corruption. And as we know, tax evasion, financial crime, terrorism, corruption will go on even without cash and even without higher enumerated bills. And more importantly, the idea that they are putting this forward as if any of these corporations are concerned with tax evasion, financial crime, terrorism, corruption, because all these corporations and banks are actually involved in tax evasion, financial crime, terrorism, corruption. So why would they go after it? And then we have Larry Summers did an op-ed. Of course, Larry Summers has a lot of background with the Federal Reserve and the World Bank and various U.S. administrations. He also suggests that, quote, it's time to kill the $100 bill. And then Kenneth Rogoff came out against cash and high denomination bills and said that, quote, abolishing physical currency would stop tax evasion and crime, unquote. So we're going to see that mantra again. So they're all working from the same playlist. So that's another reason why we know it's bullshit, because they're all working from the same playlist talking about this reason why they want to get rid of cash. It was a big topic at the 2015 Bilderberg meeting, so that certainly says that this is a high on the priority of the handlers and the corporations and the banks. UK economist from the Bank of England, Jim Leavis, came out and wrote an article and said that a cashless society would achieve by, quote, forcing everyone to spend only by electronic means from an account held at a government-run bank, which would be monitored or even directly controlled by the government, unquote. I'm sure that's what everyone, and especially certainly my viewers, are looking forward to, is forcing everyone to spend only electronically from an account held at a government-run bank that is directly controlled by the government. That's a great argument for a cashless society, isn't it? And then we have a Bloomberg piece in just this last month in February 2016, and it said, "Bring on a cashless future," and it calls for the elimination of notes and coins, and then calls them dirty, dangerous, unwieldy, and expensive, unquote. So here we've had cash and coins for thousands, if not thousands of years, and somehow now all of a sudden they're dirty, dangerous, unwieldy, and expensive. And ironic to hear financialists and bankers talk about the very foundation of their systems that has existed for all these thousands of years, and now calling it dirty, dangerous, unwieldy, and expensive. What a turnaround! And then we have a call from Norway's banks, because they say they can't track or control 60% of the cash out there, and thinks that money needs to be phased out. And so that that gives another glimpse of the real agenda, of course, when Norway's banks said they can't track or control. So we have the corporations, we have the banks, and we have the government now wanting to make sure they can track or control all of the money activity out there. And of the 1.4 trillion total U.S. currency in circulation, 1.1 trillion of it is $100 bills. So when you hear these people like Larry Summers calling for the elimination of the $100 bills, They're actually asking for the elimination of cash when nearly all the cash in circulation is $100 bills. So let's remember that. And then Germany is even suggesting a ban on cash, and they already have suggesting a ban on cash transactions over 5,000 euros. And this is already practiced in some countries. And so the idea, once again, being able to control and monitor, and this idea that somehow people using cash is part of this black market that needs to be eliminated, and suggests that this cash, ill-gotten gains, it's all criminal activities. And certainly as long as the banks are involved with cash, then it is a criminal activity and it is a black market. So it's ironic once again to see a government and banks that have these they're cooking their books and have all these black funds, and we can't even account for hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, and yet they're not going to turn the microscope on themselves. They're going to turn the microscope on the people, because we're the problem. We're the ones that are doing all this crazy shit with cash. And I think one of the more interesting articles I've seen come out is in the Financial Times, because it's an anonymous article. And as everyone knows, the Financial Times is one of the biggest bullhorns for the financial banking system status quo, and is in many respects just another arm of the banks. And they called for abolishing cash to, quote, give more power to the central banks, unquote. So they're being very honest about it. That's the bottom line. The central banks want to eliminate cash because then right now they can just print money, and that's strange enough out of thin air. But now, of course, with the deterioration of the economy and the financial system and all the smoke and mirrors and voodoo out there, the central banks need more power. And especially in an era of zero and negative interest rates, the elimination of cash would be the final blow of turning over all power to the central banks. And in fact, there's the quote in this article is the quote, the case for retiring another barbaric relic. And let's remember, this is the same people who come out and call gold-backed currency a barbarous relic. And now somehow, once again, cash and coin systems that have been used by all different kinds of financial and economic systems for thousands of years, now all of a sudden is a, quote, barbarous relic, unquote. And as far as I'm concerned, the barbarous relic that we have in the world are banks. That is the truly barbarous relic. And if we could eliminate central banks, particularly, money would regain its value, and wealth would be returned. But this article goes on to lament that people are stockpiling cash in anticipation of collapse, which is causing a, quote, a lot of distortion in the economic system. Once again, this staggering hypocrisy. They lament that people are stockpiling cash in anticipation of a collapse, and that it's a distortion of the economic system. And since when has the government and the banks and the central banks and the corporations ever been interested in the distortion of the economic system? Do you think people hoarding cash is anywhere near the way that corporations and banks hoard cash and have these offshore accounts? And what an incredible distortion it is for everything in the economic system. For example, buybacks that I just did a video on, a much larger distortion to the economic system than people hoarding cash because they're afraid there's going to be a collapse. And so cash, like I've been alluding to, cash limits a central bank's ability to stimulate a depressed economy. So they're interested in eliminating cash because they'll be totally unaccountable for any kind of economic stimulus and QE and printing money out of thin air to save all these broke-ass governments and all these broke-ass corporations. And so that's the bottom line. No cash would give the government power to lift taxes right out of people's accounts. So that's another problem with this cashless society. The government you wouldn't do tax returns anymore. They would just take the money. And you can see the problems there. We have enough problems with the government and taxes. The idea that they could just get into your account and take what they want is something I'm sure we could all look forward to. And government also could eliminate the untracked economy. Once again, here's this hypocrisy. They want to eliminate the untracked economy for people buying drugs and maybe untaxed cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. But they certainly don't want to eliminate the untracked economy, the shadow banking system, or the shadow black funds that the U.S. government uses, and of course all the cooked books, and then the whole idea that eliminating cash would the system they would put together would punish people who use cash and make them pay for the privilege of anonymity. So that's another sinister aspect of this whole thing about no cash is really they want people to pay to be left alone. Right now it's kind of nice because there's still some areas where people can operate anonymously, and this is just another area where they want to eliminate that, particularly with cash. They want to know what everyone on earth is spending their money on and when. And of course we know what they're going to do with that kind of information. And like I say, the background of cashless society goes back to another fear that certainly a lot of people in the alternative community and the alternative media have been concerned with, and that's the idea of eliminating cash and giving people chips. And the talk has been biometric chips that would be implanted in every person, which would make it really easy, and that's certainly the goal in the future for the handlers and the masters and the people who and the elites who control the world, because then they'll be able to control what everyone does, everyone on the planet does at all times. Because once the chip is planted, of course, if they don't like what you say and what you do, they can just turn off your chip. You won't be able to pay rent, you won't be able to buy food, you won't be able to do anything. And then, of course, they'll also be able to track you anywhere. Right now, I'm not so sure that the biometric chip is what they're going to go for, although ultimately that would be the most efficient. Right now, the fact that everyone has a cell phone is already made up for that, and the cell phone is already being designed and geared towards a cashless society, being able to walk through a store and just wave your cell phone and pay for everything. These are steps that people are already taking themselves. And so once again, it's one of those programs where people are already embracing it, and before it gets turned on them, they'll already have embraced it. They don't need a government to force it on them. So cell phones is a good example of that. Everyone has one, and they'll be more than willing to sacrifice their freedom to have this convenience of cell phones, which is pretty obvious right now. And I think one of the more interesting aspects too is this surgence of PayPal. And I even noticed a great commercial where they talked over move over old money, welcome the new money, a PayPal commercial. And so it's already going mainstream, and PayPal split with eBay, and now is going to position itself as a global pay system that is essentially cashless, although based on using bank accounts. But at the same time, it's going to set up an infrastructure for a cashless society. So we're seeing it in the mainstream as well already. And I think one of my favorite quotes that I got out of reading all these articles about negative interest rates and cashless society and buybacks is a quote from Alan Greenspan in 1966. And he said, quote, "The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves," unquote. And he is talking about a cashless society. So Alan Greenspan, of course, like everything else, he flip-flopped. He used to be for financial sanity, and now he's the godfather of financial insanity. But even he knew back then that the welfare state and the elites and the government want to make sure that people have no way to protect their wealth, and certainly the way they're using their wealth. So this whole move to a cashless society, on the facade, it's about efficiency, and it's about fighting corruption and fraud and crime and money laundering and terrorism and all this bullshit. But actually, it's just another control mechanism to take away your economic freedom. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.